I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, April 12th, 2023 Chesapeake Bay Board. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition in sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. Roll call, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Roadley.
Here.
Mr. O'Brien.
Here.
Ms. Bowie. Here. Mr. Dunn.
Here. You have the minutes from the March 8th, 2023 meeting. Any changes or additions? Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes from the March 8th meeting as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Tonight's public hearings, we have 8 hearings on the agenda. The outline of tonight's hearings will be a staff presentation followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. After everyone wishing to speak have done so, the public hearing will be closed and discussion among the board will start. With that, our first case is CBPA 23-0017 at 9230 Pocahontas Trail. Mr. Long.
Mr. Chair, before we start, while Mr. Long's getting ready, I just want to remind everybody in the audience and the board that we only have 4 members tonight, and any approval does require 3 affirmative votes.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-23-0017. Mr. Anthony Lubier of VHB has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Peninsula Pentecostals, Inc. for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a sanitary sewer located at 9230 Pocahontas Trail within the acreage lot subdivision and the Skiffs Creek watershed. You can see this parcel outlined above here in blue. It's a fairly large parcel, and the watershed boundaries are delineated here in yellow. This parcel was replatted in 2015 after the changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Kind of zooming in a little bit on the overall parcel and scope of work here. The area in question of which will impact the RPA is in this southwestern corner here. Zooming in on the area in particular. Some topography, you can see the property line fairly well splits a stream, which is shown with the subsequent RPA shown here in blue, and the existing JCSA water line here in pink. The total lot size of that property is 23.43 acres. However, the area designated for the proposed sanitary sewer crossing is approximately 6.92 acres, of which 10% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to install a sanitary sewer connection associated with the Peninsula Pentecostals church construction. This sanitary sewer impact is shown down here on the bottom of this site plan in yellow. The wetlands for this property are shown here in green, and the subsequent RPA is shown in red, with the closest RPA to the wetlands being the seaward 50-foot RPA and the one furthest away being the landward 50-foot RPA. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 763 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 922 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 1,685 square feet. Again, this is shown a little bit further up or closer here. The only portion of this proposal that is being heard before the board tonight is this section here in yellow. Required mitigation for this amount of impacts would be the recordation of a deed of natural open space for an area twice the size of the impacted area. This would equate to 3,500 square feet. Some site photographs, kind of standing at the edge of the field, looking back down towards the RPA and the wetlands. Standing in the woods a little bit further in, you can see the depressional area and the stream. We are currently standing in the buffer here. There is an existing, you can see manholes, not incredibly visibly in these photographs, though they do run alongside the upper bank of this photo. And the stream of which we were discussing is right here. Standing down at the edge of wetlands, looking back upwards towards the entirety of the RPA. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a sanitary sewer. This application does meet the ordinance in section 23-11, 23-14, and should be heard by the board because the installation of a sanitary sewer is not water dependent and is proposed to be constructed within the RPA buffer. The board may grant exceptions to 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. That the exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed. That reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be moderate for the proposed development. Staff does recommend approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into its approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must record a deed of natural open space in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of land disturbing permit. That this exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 12th, 2024. And that written requests for an extension must be submitted no later than March 1st, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Long?
The sewer over or under the stream?
It's my understanding that it goes over. I will let I'll defer to the applicant for specifics on those engineering.
On the site plan, what were the other 2 large red blobs?
Sure.
I don't know if that's the technical term for them, but.
Yes, so these 2 areas here in red are outfalls for the proposed BMPs. They are being handled or approved administratively through another formal CBPA process.
Okay, thank
but
you.
yes, those are outfalls to the BMPs, which are located here and here.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the board?
Good evening. I'm Steve Romeo, VHB.
Hi, Steve.
Chuck, how you been? Long time. I'm here on behalf of the Peninsula Pentecostals. Also in the audience is John McSherry. He's the parish administrator for the church. Mr. O'Brien, to answer your question, the sewer will be under the creek. The sewer is deep enough that we can get under it through a directional drill.
Thanks.
I can answer any other questions you may have, and there are no objections to anything in the staff report.
Any other questions for Mr. Romeo? Thank you. Any other questions from members of the audience? Mr. Long?
One letter as public comment that I have been requested to read into the record. Mr. Long, thank you for taking the time to meet with me today on the Pentecostal's request for the encroachments into the RPA buffer for the sanitary sewer connection on property located at 9230 Pocahontas Trail. Would you please pass along my concerns to the Chesapeake Bay Board? My concerns are the integrity of the existing sewer system, approaching 40 years old, the current water quality of the stream running alongside the sewer system, and the physical connection of the new sewer system crossing over/under the stream. Thank you.
Mr. Long, in response to that, I assume there's an erosion and sediment control plan that goes along with these plans?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so they'll directional boring under the stream and then suitable E&S control on the exposed uplands.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
I have no objection to this site plan. They've stayed outside the RPA largely. Just this is the minimum they need in order to tap into the sewer line. I have no objections.
I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA TAC 23 TAC 0017 at 9230 Pocahontas Trail.
All right, we have a motion to adopt the resolution. Is there any discussion amongst the board? Hearing none. Mr. Wilson, a roll call?
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
The next item on the agenda is CBPA-230015 at 4101 Monticello Avenue. Ms. Benedict.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 23-0015. Mr. Ryan Stevenson with AES Consulting Engineers has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Windswept Development for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a sanitary sewer located at 4101 Monticello Avenue within the settlement at Powhatan Creek subdivision in the Powhatan Creek watershed. Above, you can see the parcel outlined here in blue, and again, the watershed outlined in yellow. This project is part of the settlement at Powhatan Creek Phase 4, and the parcel was platted in 2005 after the changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here is aerial photography of the parcel as a whole, and zooming in particularly on the area of the project. Here is topography at the site, which is fairly flat, and the resource protection area as it affects this project, as well as the floodplain. Additionally, there is the JCSA water line. The total lot size of this property is 14.56 acres, of which 38% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to install a sanitary sewer connection associated with the settlement at Powhatan Creek Phase 4 construction. Here on the site plan, you can see the 100-foot resource protection area shown in red, as well as the edge of wetlands shown in green, and then the proposed sanitary sewer connection here in yellow. Total impacts to the RPA associated with the proposal equate to 505 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 242 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 747 square feet of impacts. Required mitigation for this amount of impacts is the recordation of a deed of natural open space for an area twice the size of the impacted RPA, which would equal about 1,500 square feet. Here is site photography standing in the area of the connection. This is looking back from the area towards the proposed development. And this is standing, bless you, at the edge of the proposed development, just looking back towards the project area. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a sanitary sewer. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the installation of a sanitary sewer is not water dependent and is proposed to be constructed within the RPA buffer. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with this proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must record a deed of natural open space in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a land disturbing permit. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by April 12th, 2024, and written request for an extension to the exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than March 1st, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Benedict? Thank you.
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant care to address the board?
Ryan Stevenson with AES Consulting Engineers at 5248 Old Town Road. Just here to answer any questions you guys may have.
Questions for Mr. Stevenson? No? Thank you very much. Would anybody else care to address this item? Yes, sir. State your name and address for the record.
My name is DeWitt Yisler. I live at 3709 South Square in the settlement at Powhatan Creek, and I live in Phase 3, and this is Phase 4. We've got people in our community that are very upset that nobody has come to us to tell us what Phase 4 is. Phase 4 was sold as a separate entity. Originally, it was scheduled to be with all of us, Phase 1, 2, and 3. The developers sold it about a year or so ago. We've asked for the last couple of months for the developer to come and tell the community what you're planning on doing, what you can do, what we can help. And in a letter from the county that was dated back in February, that one of the proffers were they had to have a clubhouse and recreational. And basically what they did is they slapped us in the face. They basically said, it's already there. Well, nobody has told us that they're going to be part of our HOA. Now, my question is, if this is approved, who is going to be responsible for the cleanup and who's going to pay for it? Because right now, we don't have the money to go and pay for that because that's a separate entity at the front of the thing. So that's my first question. The second question is, how are we going to pay for that? How are they going to do this thing without going into the RPA area? Because if you look at the original drawings and what they had, there's a lot of areas that they're trying to get townhouses built in. Now, I'm not sure that that's your guys' alleyway, but that's part of the area there. Because when this was originally sold, there was only 9 acres out of that 21 acres that was even developable. So I'm asking for some comment, and also if the board would do is hold back on this thing, because basically we need some assurances from the developer, really what's going to happen here. And you know, the old saying is you got to rub me a little bit and smooth me. They haven't done anything. They've totally ignored us. Now, I will say one thing. The county has been absolutely outstanding to us in helping us with memos and all, coming back, going to the developer, to Mr. Stevenson, about questions we had. He has said that he would ask the developer to come to us, but yet we don't have anything. So if you guys have any questions, I'll certainly try to. And this may not even be your ballywag, but anyway, this is very important to the 266 homes that we got in there. What's going to happen to that acreage in front of us? Or if they flood it, where's it going to go? Into our ponds that we already got there?
And I'm sorry I missed your name. Could you?
Wait, you sir? Or you can call me Bill. That's fine.
Okay, Bill.
That's easier.
So I can break apart some of what you've asked us. We clearly are here for the encroachment into the RPA.
Understand.
Associated with the sanitary sewer line. The legal ramifications of selling the property and it being not contiguous or connected to your existing residential community, I can't comment on that. I wasn't prepared to make, and it's not really within the jurisdiction of the board. With respect to the land plan and what they're proposing, as you can see on the screen, you know, you have the townhomes. I see some common space, and then I see a rather large BMP to treat the stormwater. You mentioned cleanup. Was it cleanup of construction debris or cleanup of?
Let's just say that you have the pipe that you want to connect to. And again, I'm not familiar enough with how they do with the sewer lines. Well, I've looked at the drawing, but they're so hard to read. It's, you know, when you got a 4x8 sheet, it's not very.
Yep.
But it looks like they're going to hook into the existing line. What happens if that line bursts? Who's responsible for it, and how's it going to get cleaned up? And who's going to pay for it? That's to me is very important. I mean, we don't have the money.
Understood. Mr. Stevenson, can you offer any light on, is this accepted into the sanitary sewer system? Is it maintained? Sorry, can you come?
You want me to step back? Or
No, you're fine.
You're
Okay.
fine. I know you got the leer light on. It means I've got to sit down. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, it would be public sewer accepted into the JCSA system, and any kind of spillage or overflow would be, as part of the VSMP permit, would be responsibility of the property owner, and this property owner owns or will own this portion specifically, so he would be solely responsible. It would not be for phases 2, 3, or 4, or 1, 2, and 3 of the settlement.
Gotcha.
And it would go downstream. It would not affect any of the other phases of the development either.
I assume you've done the appropriate calculations to size, make sure the pipe is appropriately sized?
Yes, sir. And it was all master planned for this. Actually, we've proposed less units than what was allowed by master plan. So we're actually less dense than could have been. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, I don't know that I've addressed all your questions, but I think I've addressed the ones that are within our jurisdiction.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. But I just want to, again, this is the first time I spoke before the Chesapeake Bay, and I'm not sure how you guys handle it, but we want to make sure everything is safe.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions or comments regarding this application? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Sharon Aramita. I live at 3636 South Square. I live in the development that this is adjacent to, but not part of. I have a question for Mr. Stevenson. Is this the only impacted request that's going to affect the
Ms.
RPA?
Armato, please address the board.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I just wanted to ask him a question.
Yeah.
If the RPA is going to be impacted at any other juncture besides this connection?
Okay, thank you. I'll ask the question. Again, Mr. Stevenson, thank you.
No problem. There are no other impacts of the RPA associated with this. We have an existing stormwater outfall that was already impacted and got that request years ago. So that, I think we're going to upgrade some outlet protection, but no additional actual disturbance.
Okay, thank you. Armato, did that satisfy your question? Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, the matter is before the board. Oh,
Again-
wait a second, I will close the public hearing, excuse me. The matter is before the board.
Mr. Chairman, again, the site plan, they're right on the RPA, but the infringement that they need to cut in order to get to the sewer line seems minimal, so I have no objections.
Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA 23-0015.
We have a motion to approve. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wilson?
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next item on the agenda, CBPA 23-0035 at 3036 North Riverside Drive. Mr. Long.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-23-0035. Ms. Jennifer Hewitt has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of 2 retaining walls located at 3036 North Riverside Drive within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision and the Yarmouth Creek watershed. This parcel can be seen above, outlined here in blue, with the watershed boundary being here in yellow. Again, this is within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision, which is kind of this area which is predominantly red. This parcel was platted in 1959 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. You can see this parcel above, here in blue, with the Chickahominy River being right here. The total lot size of this property is 0.37 acres. The contours shown here indicate that there's a sloping nature to the backyard going down towards the river, and the RPA shown above. Of that 0.37 acres, 54% of this property is located in the RPA. For this particular property, that RPA is shown in blue. The FEMA flood zones as it affects this property, this is within the Zone AE flood zone with base flood elevation determined at 7 feet mean sea level. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 4-foot retaining walls to help prevent erosion on her property, equating to 70 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA. These 2 retaining walls are shown here in yellow, with a set of stairs and a sidewalk running between the 2. That area of stairs and sidewalk equate to 65 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA. Between the retaining walls and the sidewalk, the total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 145 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA. The height of the retaining walls is approximately 2.8 feet in height. On this site plan shown above, you can see the seaward 50-foot RPA here in red, with the river and the beach being at the top of this site plan, and the 100-foot resource protection area shown here in red as well. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 6 shrubs. Some site photographs. The areas here in pink indicate, the pink flagging indicates the areas that the retaining wall is going to be located or is proposed to be located. As you can see, the property slopes off from a fairly flat yard down to the beach, and the property owner wishes to place a retaining wall to kind of level out that portion of her yard. You will see there is some work being done in the upper ends of these photographs. There was additionally an administrative section of this project for the replacement of a patio. That work has begun. So the retaining wall and those stairs lead from the patio area down towards the beach. Looking back towards the other side of the retaining wall, and the approximate area of which the stairs and sidewalk are proposed. Staff has evaluated the application and exception requests for the construction of 2 retaining walls. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a retaining wall is considered accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is based on conditions or circumstances is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff provides no recommendation for this proposal. However, should the board wish to approve this proposal, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a mitigation plan equating to 6 shrubs to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. That the applicant must submit a surety of $500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. That all development activities located in the special flood hazard area must comply with Article 6, Division 3 floodplain area regulations of the James City County zoning ordinance and receive all required approval and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by April 12, 2024, and that written requests for an extension be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than March 1st, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this permit. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions for Mr. Long?
So you said there was a patio that's being constructed and that was administratively approved?
Yes, sir.
And then this retaining wall though has to come in front of us, but not the patio?
The patio is considered redevelopment because it's not extending outside of the footprint of its original impervious area. Therefore, our general policy is we can handle that portion administratively, though the retaining wall or the 2 retaining walls are accessory and then must be heard by this board.
Okay. And they come up to the front of the patio?
The walkway that is also part of this mitigation numbers and total impervious does come to the back of the patio.
Okay.
Mr. Long, could you go to the site plan and
Absolutely.
perhaps you can, so can you kind of draw where the patio is? Is that what we're seeing there, this 25 by 20?
Yes, sir. That's correct. This 25 by 20 area. That's the originally I believe it was a deck. That area has been demolished, which you can see in the photos, and that area is proposed to be patio.
And maybe you said it, but what's the purpose of the retaining wall?
It was expressed to me that the purpose of the retaining wall is to mitigate erosion, but also level out the yard. I believe the applicant is here. I will let her or that individual speak more to that question.
Did you see evidence of erosion when you were there? Do you have pictures?
There is a slope to the backyard, though there is less erosion in the upper reaches of this property than many areas. There is scouring of the beach slope here, the transition between the beach to the uplands. There is some scouring down there, though in this upper reach there is not a significant amount of erosion.
Can you go to the picture that you had that showed the flagging of the alignment?
Yes, sir.
Yep, thank you. So the scarp that you reference is at the edge of vegetation?
Yes. While there's not a picture exactly showing the scarp, there is approximately a 1 foot scarp in between this beach area here and the grassed area here.
Any other questions for Mr. Long?
Is the idea that there's going to be a wall that comes up and then it's going to be backfilled level?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Long. I will open the public hearing. Is the applicant here to address the board? Come on up. We won't bite. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hewitt, 3036 North Riverside Drive, Lenox, Virginia.
Thank you. Do you have any statements you'd like to make?
Our purpose here is I've been in this house a little over 7 years, and the amount of beach coming closer to the house is getting lower or less, I guess. The beach is getting wider because of the grass is just slowly going away. At one point, it was almost a pretty close to smooth transition from the grass to the beach part. At this point, like as a matter of fact, today, there's every bit of probably, I'd say probably about 8-inch drop from the grass down to the sand where it has steady been washing away.
So if I understand you correctly, the bulkhead or retaining wall, it's not a traditional bulkhead in the sense that you're putting it out in the close to mean high water, you're moving it way back, more as a landscape feature than as a retaining wall. Is that correct?
I really did not want a bulkhead. It seems with those, it's like you lose kind of what you're there for. Oh. And as you see, we're, well, only a couple properties that do have the beach area. And I feel like not a retaining wall, the other one, would just kind of lose all of that. My neighbors on the other side, they have that wall bulkhead, and it's just like all grown up and everything between the bulkhead, I guess, and the water. So the way I see it, they've lost that part of their property.
So one of the things that vertical structures tend to do is concentrate energy. So under normal sunny days like today, it's a landscape feature, it's there. During a storm event, if you had wave energy approaching that structure, what you would end up having is further erosion, not of the area behind it necessarily,
Right.
but in front of it. So it ends up creating scour, and oftentimes you see bulkheads with no beach or wetlands in front, and then hence they're discouraged. Using in favor of either a living shoreline or, in certain cases, a riprap revetment that does a better job of dissipating the energy without causing the erosion. You've moved this one far enough back from the edge of the water that it probably would only be an extreme event that would happen. But I get your purpose. I take it it's more of a landscape feature than it is of erosion protection.
I would like to, we have more flat backyard area. Why they started out building these houses closer to the water versus the road? Because the backyard is where you would like to be, I guess. That's us, but there's really, but that's all said and done. But we would just like a little bit of a flatter area there. As you can see, we can't, we don't mow with a riding lawnmower or anything because of how steep the hill is. And it's gotten to the point now I can't even push it. My husband has to do it.
Yeah. Any other questions for Mrs. Hewitt?
I have a question about the proposed sidewalk, the material for that, and
Yes,
the
ma'am.
steps. What will that be?
It's pavers. The patio, like he was saying, and sidewalk was in very bad shape, wood and busted up concrete. So because that was already the footprint, I think it's called. So we were just like improved area that already had something there.
Mrs. Hewitt, if this were to be approved, do you have a contractor in mind to
Yes.
construct it? The reason I ask the question is it can be tricky in these situations to get a properly constructed, seated at the appropriate depth structure so that it doesn't fail on you. And
It's R.E. Coleman.
I just,
Yeah,
sometimes we have property owners that are doing it themselves,
no,
and
no, no,
yeah.
no. That's not
Stan?
me.
So you don't know actually the depth of the boards.
No, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else care to address the board on this matter? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Matter is before the board.
But it sounds like it's a landscape feature to create a level surface near the patio and more of a backyard effect. But, the question is, does it have any detriment to water quality? I mean, constructed properly, probably not. That would be my question.
It does make a difference that this is essentially a maintained backyard. It's not an RPA buffer in natural, untouched condition. We do, going back to our kind of casework, often look at retaining structures to help alleviate the erosion on a slope, to arrest that and allow the area to become stabilized. This really isn't that situation. You raise a good point. Any other discussion? Matter is before the board. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, in your experience with, by extending and raising and adding fill dirt behind the wall to level out the property, the infiltration behind that, and it's just partly from my education, but how would that have any effect on the water quality?
As we talked about in some of the other casework that we've had in front of us, a properly constructed retaining wall with gravel infiltration creates, to some degree, a medium for filtration of water coming down the slope. Depending upon the final elevation of the crest of the retaining wall, would tell me if the water was going downslope or actually going into the yard. I think that probably the intention to make it level is to have it infiltrate more than flow in one direction or the other. We don't have construction details for the retaining wall or the backfill to specifically address your question.
Yeah, there's no swales that are going to move the water directly into the resource that I can see from the picture, but
I can tell you from my perspective, this is, if it were a vegetated tree, three trophic level setting, I would probably be less in favor of the project because it is, in my view, a landscape feature. But I don't know that it is contributing excessively to degraded water quality. So, my impression.
all right, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case number CBPA TAC 23 TAC 0035 at 3036 North Riverside Drive.
We have a motion to approve. Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wilson?
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you, Mrs. Hewitt. The next item on the agenda is CBPA-23-0011 at 1727 Centennial Drive. Ms. Benedict.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 23-0011. Mr. James Fromiller has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a deck at property located at 1727 Centennial Drive within the Retreat subdivision and the Diason Creek watershed. Here is the parcel outlined in blue and the Diason Creek watershed outlined here in yellow. This parcel was platted in 2002 prior to the changes in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here's aerial photography of the property. Topography at the site, which is fairly flat. The resource protection area shown here in this sort of orange color. The total lot size of the property is 3.04 acres, of which 68% is located within the RPA. In February of 2023, officials from the James City County Stormwater and Resource Protection Division received notice that a deck was being constructed on this property without the submission of a Chesapeake Bay Preservation exception request. The applicant became aware that the contractor at the time had not required any permits for this project after starting construction, and has since fired that contractor and is attempting to gain approval of the construction of the deck after the fact. Here you can see the site plan with the 150-foot resource protection areas shown in red. This blue hatched area is the proposed deck that is outside of the RPA completely, and the area in yellow is the proposed deck that is within the landward 50-foot RPA. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 508 square feet of impacts in the landward 50-foot RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 1 canopy tree, 2 understory trees, and 6 shrubs. Because this exception request is being heard before the board after the fact, staff would require double the mitigation units equating to 2 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, and 12 shrubs. Here is site photography. This is at the side of the house, a portion of the deck already constructed that continues on around the back of the home. Another view of the back of the property and the continuation of the deck as it wraps around. And just a straight on shot of that back portion of the deck. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a deck. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of a deck is considered accessory in nature, and this exception request is being heard by the board after the fact. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with this proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a mitigation plan equating to 2 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, and 12 shrubs to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant must submit a surety of $2,500 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. The applicant must place 3 inches of gravel underneath the footprint of the deck. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 12th, 2024, and written request for an extension to this exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than March 1st, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Benedict?
Was there an existing deck prior to this?
I do not believe so, but I will let the applicant confirm that.
No, this is an open deck. Nothing above it.
No, nothing above it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant care to address the board? Name and address, please.
Good evening, Jim Fromiller, 1727 Centennial Drive. To answer your question, the house originally has 2 staircases coming straight out the back of the house. So the one, it's 2 stories in the back. The one comes 16 feet just straight out the back of the house. And the other one's about 8 feet coming straight out. None of them turn, none of them have any landings, which makes it difficult for me. I have knee replacements, bad hip. Just makes it hard to get out, that many stairs coming straight out. So that's one of the reasons. Obviously, it would be nice to have a deck. And then I was going to put the staircase down at the low end, so I don't have that many stairs to go up and down, and replace those stairs, because just those long stairs, they were unsafe to get up and down, to answer that. And then there was another question, if it was an open deck. Yeah, totally open, just to connect the 2 staircases and have the one steps to get up and down.
So we note that this is an after-the-fact application. Is there any context you'd like to put behind that?
I went and got the HOA approval. You know, the contractor gave me all the plans. I went and got the HOA approval, got all of that. I assumed, bad assumption obviously at this point, I assumed he went and got all the permits. We discussed permits, and I assumed that was taken care of. It wasn't. You know, as soon as I found out that wasn't, I ceased stopped everything. And then I started looking at the work being done. Well, it wasn't done according to what was discussed. So then I immediately fired him. That's a whole other legal battle that I'm dealing with now. So nothing's been touched. I mean, the deck hasn't been touched. As soon as that happened, you know, back then, everything's been stopped. I have a wood structure sitting in the back of the yard that most of it's gonna have to come down probably. And then the plans that I submitted here actually extends it out the way it needs to be built. And the footprints that it's actually gonna, you know, entail, which is it's extending it over just a little bit farther, that was supposed to be built. But that's where we are, you know, what happened with that. And that's where I am with that. So now, and once I knew that, it's like, I need to get it right. And that's where I am, so.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming. Would anybody else care to address the board?
I did have a comment that was emailed to us that I'd like to read into the record. We received your notification letter for encroachments into the resource protection area for the construction and approval of a deck on the property located at 1727 Centennial Drive. We have reviewed the complete description and plan requirements that are provided in the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division files. We are writing this letter to show support for Mr. and Mrs. Fromiller's said plan. Also, due to the fact that we have work engagements that preclude us from attending in person the public hearing, we would like for the board to please count this letter as our vote of confidence for approval. Thank you for your time and attention.
That adjacent property owner?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
It was 508 square feet of impacts. Did I hear that correctly? Yeah. Seemed like it's an excessively large structure.
I do have a question for staff. Is gravel proposed underneath, some type of erosion protection underneath? Yeah.
Yeah, and the mitigation units are doubled, so.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board Case CBPA 23-0011.
We have a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request. Any additional discussion? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA 23-0031 at 205 Burwell Forest. Mr. Long.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-23-0031. Mr. Chase Grogg, Landtech Resources, Inc., has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Greenwood Homes Hampton Roads, LLC, for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling located at 205 Bulwell Forest within the Fords Colony subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. This can be seen above on your screens, the parcel outlined here in blue with the watershed divide here in yellow. Again, this is within the Fords Colony subdivision. The total lot size of this property is 0.69 acres. The property itself is also shown above is a flag lot that extends down into these woods here. Contours of this property include a fairly a sloping nature down towards the rear of the property, of which wetlands can be found adjacent and on property. JCSA sewer as it affects this lot, outlined here in yellow. And the RPA as it affects this lot, 87% of this lot is constrained by the resource protection area, which is outlined here in red. This property does flow directly into a wetland system, which discharges down following these arrows here and down into a much more extensive wetland system. There is a BMP essentially on the lot, or just off of the lot. I believe it's a timber wall, but the applicants are proposing to construct a single-family dwelling with an attached deck, shown above here on the screen. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 2,640 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 1,676 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 4,316 square feet of impacts as a whole. On your screens above, you can see this red line here being the 100-foot resource protection area, and this red line being the 50-foot resource protection area, with the green line being the edge of the wetlands. The majority of these wetlands that affect this property are seep-driven, so they come up the slope, and that is why this bump out in the wetlands occurs towards the edge of the street. This is the cul-de-sac down here, and the remainder of the wetlands being the top of this screen. The area highlighted here in yellow indicates the portion of this proposal which is occurring within the landward 50-foot RPA, and the area in orange being within the seaward 50-foot RPA. The minimum first floor square footage required for this section of Ford's Colony is 2,000 square feet. Therefore, the proposed house has a first floor square footage equating to 2,558 square feet, which is 28% larger than the minimum requirements. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 11 planting units, which equates to 11 canopy trees, 22 understory trees, and 33 shrubs. The applicant is proposing to plant 7 planting units and purchase the remaining 4 credits through the James City County Mitigation Fund at a cost of $3,000. Additionally, there are 2 proposed infiltration trenches, which can be seen above, highlighted in pink. The first one being located in this region, and the second one, the smaller of the 2, being located in the southwestern portion of this property. We have highlighted the building setback lines here in blue for your reference. Additionally, the clearing above the larger of the 2 infiltration trenches is for the sanitary sewer line, of which was shown on the screen earlier. And the limits of clearing indicated here in this black squiggling line. Staff would recommend or is requesting that an affidavit also be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse because of the environmental sensitivity of this lot. The mitigation plan, as it has been provided, again, the 2 infiltration trenches that are proposed, and then these 7 planting units as shown on the screen above. And then this is just a comparison. When this lot was platted, the wetlands that were shown on the plat that was produced in 2003 were shown here in green. Oops, excuse me. And the RPA would have affected it in a manner similar to what's shown in red here. This property was delineated within the past year and has shown now to be a much more extensively impacted lot. So that's just for your information. Some site photographs from the cul-de-sac looking down towards the driveway and the lot itself. These flags here indicate, I believe, on the left-hand side where the driveway is going to be located. And then kind of looking directly down towards the area where the house will be, this orange stake here is a house corner. Looking from the side angle back towards the existing houses, which are kind of upgrade and in front of the proposed house. Again, another house corner over here in orange. And looking down towards the wetlands and that BMP, you can see in this picture is located right here. Standing at the very, very back of the property, looking back up towards, straight line through the house and through the driveway as a whole. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling. The application does meet the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of the single-family dwelling extends into the seaward 50-foot RPA. Staff has the board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a surety of $5,250 in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings of 7 planting units. The applicant must submit a payment of $3,000 into the James City County Mitigation Fund prior to the issuance of a building permit. The applicant must place 3 inches of gravel underneath the footprint of the deck. Then an affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. Bless you. That this exception request approval will become null and void if construction is not begun by April 12th, 2024, and that written request for an extension to an exception must be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than March 1st, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date of this exception request. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Mr. Long, you mentioned that in your summary that this drainage from this lot flows into the adjacent wetland and then downstream, if you will. Would this wetland have been RPA wetland prior to 2000?
From my understanding, I do not believe so. I would defer to staff to.
That slide of the
Mr. Rodley, would you clarify that question, please, for me?
Would the wetland adjacent to or on this property have qualified as a resource protection area feature in 1990 when the Chesapeake Bay Act was passed?
The wetland that's shown on the left hand of this graphic?
Correct.
$1990.
What's the date of that one on the left?
That would be 2003.
And the reason I asked the question, and I'll give you a little time, is part of the issue with these types of lots in the county is that some of them were not encumbered with the Bay Act when the Bay Act was passed, and then through subsequent interpretation of the act, lots that had been platted are now subject to something that didn't exist when the lot was put to record. So in this case, I'm just curious if this lot falls into that category of lots that were adversely affected by changes in the regulation, or whether it would have been considered to be an RPA feature at the time.
Thank you for that clarification. I understand your question now, and I can not intentionally mislead you. Or unintentionally. The graphic on the left would have been RPA based on the 1990 ordinance. You are correct in that this subdivision was caught in the 2004 ordinance change, but that did not affect the RPA in this particular case. The intention of this graphic was to show how the wetland system has changed over 20-some years, whether that is due to changes in the way the Corps of Engineers looks at things or definitions, or the way things were done 20 years ago versus now, is a question up for debate, but not tonight. But yes, the graphic on the left was RPA based on the 1990 ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Any other questions of staff? Mr. Long, the stormwater plan, I take it, does incorporate infiltration, but does it include, I'll use the word use, of the retaining structure that's partially on the property?
I am not aware, but I will allow the applicant to speak to that issue.
And just for clarity, you mentioned that the house size was some percentage larger than the minimum house size for this lot?
Yes, sir. It's approximately 558 square feet larger. The minimum house size is 2,000 square feet. This house size in total at first floor square footage is equal to 2,558 square feet.
Thank you.
Just to make sure I understand the site plan, so the earthen berm that's going to be built, is that's going around the entire property?
I'm sorry, earthen berm.
So it says contractor to install earth berm to prevent stormwater runoff onto lot 20, and I'm looking at it, it looks like it points to the squiggly line you referred to. And
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's good, if they're going to place an earthen berm all the way around and funnel water to the infiltration trenches? Is that?
Yes, so I don't think it would go all the way around the property. It would go in this general region to flow, or to allow the grade to flow down towards that infiltration trench, like you were saying. Its exact whereabouts and points of stopping, I will also defer to the applicant on.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Mr. Long.
Thank you.
I will open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the board?
Good evening, members of the board. Chase Grogg with Land Tech Resources, 205 Bulifants Boulevard, Suite E, Williamsburg, Virginia. Mr. Dunn, to answer your question to start with, yes, the berm, as we've talked about in the past, the county as well as Ford's Colony do not like seeing cross-lot drainage. As well in this instance, we also wanted to catch that impervious and direct it to the infiltration. So the plan is for that berm to kind of go along the pipe stem, and then when the property takes an angle, the flow, there'll be a swale there, so the berm will stop and it'll fall into a swale. On the mitigation plan, you'll notice there was kind of the bed in front of the house and then the bed along the property, and it will go in between, yeah, just as shown there. So that water will kind of go around there and then filter down into the filtration. Due to kind of the constraints on this lot, so we have a couple of easements on the left, so the back of the house is right against a BMP easement. There's the JCSA easement, as well as then we have the wetlands on the right. So in essence of, we couldn't catch necessarily all the impervious on the back of the house, but since this lot all drains to the back, we're catching a majority, all of the driveway. The front of the house will all be directed to these infiltration trenches. We're basically treating everything but about 500 square feet of impervious that's within the RPA, though it's not necessarily impervious, all of it drains to the back there. So though it's not necessarily that, all of the impervious within the RPA from a square footage perspective, we're catching all but about 500 square feet just because of our limitations of, we're catching everything in front. That total is just 500 less than what's in the RPA. And Mr. Ridley, to answer your question, yes, so all the water to the left is going to go into that BMP. So everything, that doesn't infiltrate, during a good storm on the left side, anything that doesn't infiltrate there will go over top and flow into that BMP, and everything along the entire left side of the house will still go into that BMP before we get there. To talk briefly on the house size, when we first started this project, we were utilizing the graphic on the left, and we had I had a miscommunication with county, we'll say, and so we actually had submitted this plot plan previously, and the house was actually kinked way to the right into what ended up being wetlands. So staff had made a site visit, requested that the site be delineated currently. That's what added the seeps in on the right side and caused us to swing the house to the left. So the owner had already gone through house design, structural engineering, and some approvals with Ford's Colony, and so that's where that difference is coming up. Though, from a mitigation standpoint, it's basically one unit over, 1 unit of mitigation, for that additional square footage. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Grogg? Get all the fun ones.
Yes. More to come.
What kept you from going more to the left?
So we can't zoom in on it, but right to the left of that screen porch, there's actually right there, there's a little 5-foot easement, and that easement comes off of the JCSA easement, so you can see that kind of runs right over, so the house couldn't swing any, further to the left due to that constraint.
That easement visual, can we see that on this image to the left?
Yes, it's that right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's that dark line that then kind of dies into the JCS easement on the left. It's their access easement to be able to maintain the BMP.
Any other questions for Mr. Grogg?
And I guess I'll add to even swinging it more to the left doesn't alleviate. We're still 100% in the RPA, so it doesn't alleviate.
I think
impacts.
The question was more to reduce the seaward 50-foot encroachment, but yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak on this matter? I will close the public hearing. The matter is, bless you, the matter is before the board.
Bless you.
Any discussion?
Difficult lot, just, is the minimum being done here?
In this case, because it's all 100% within the RPA, I really would prefer that it be at the minimum. I mean, he's done a good job trying to move the water into the infiltration trenches. I like the berm. That it's, I don't know what it is at the closest, but it looks like it's within 20 feet of the RPA, or sorry, of the wetland. In the end, you have to get untreated water that runs back into the watershed. I don't know. Not sure what he can do about that. So because of that, for me, I just want to see it's the absolute minimum.
Very good. Any additional comment from the board or discussion?
Did we hear earlier that the 28% larger than the HOA minimum requirement, 2,000 square feet, was because the house architecture was already pre-designed? So they were working with an existing plan, or was the...
I am going to open the public hearing, since this is essential to the question, and ask Mr. Grogg to address that question.
So like I do with all of these lots, I contacted staff previously, and we had a miscue on what I thought we were going to be utilizing the green line to the left between, because sometimes those lines are still accurate, other times they're not. So what happened was, that was the understanding how we move forward. The plot plan was submitted that way. And like I said, it was actually swung to the right side, because at that point, with that line on the left, we were trying to keep the house as far out of the RPA as possible, so it paralleled the right setback. Staff went out there to make a site visit and went, no, there's wetlands across the back. And so they said, we went back, got a delineation completed. I don't know if staff might remember offhand when we originally submitted this, but it's been a couple months. So we got the wetlands delineated, redid our site plan, and brought it back. So that's where the square footage for this particular house, where that came from. Does that answer your question, Mr. O'Brien?
That's a paper-only square footage. I mean, that's they have architectural plans for that, or is that?
Oh yeah, the plan. Yeah. Their plans. They have the structural engineering done. Forts Colonies okayed the plan. It was all, and that's when the plot plan got submitted that the issue became up. So this has been what they've been waiting on to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I will point out, Mr. Grogg, that the option exists to hear a motion or request deferral if you so see fit. We'll keep the public hearing open in case Mr. Grogg wishes to make additional comments, but ask if there's any more discussion from the board.
In the recent past, we've made others go back for the minimum. So I think the board, if the board, whatever decision-making process is, for me, I find that in harmony with the board to hold that standard, and not, because that would be can't remember what the requirement is, but essentially would be conferring an advantage to another homeowner that we did not allow to somebody else.
I think that request is reasonable to consider the minimum.
Mr. Grogg, the discussion amongst the board is to reconfigure the house at the minimum square footage.
We'll defer, or we would like to put in a request to defer.
The applicant is requesting a deferral of their application. We'll leave the public hearing open.
Can I make a motion to defer or to accept the applicant? Or...
A motion, I will make a motion to approve a deferral request for CBPA case 23-0031. Mr. Wilson?
There's a motion for deferral. Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion is passed.
Matter is deferred. The public hearing will remain open. Thank you, Mr. Grogg. Next item on the agenda is CBPA-23-0025 at 100 Red Berkshire. Ms. Benedict.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 23-0025. Mr. Chase Grogg with Atlantic Resources has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Surin Properties for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a single-family dwelling with a deck located at 100 Red Berkshire within the Ford's Colony subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. You can see the parcel here outlined in blue. This parcel was platted in 1999 prior to the changes to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 2004. Here is aerial photography of the property. Topography on the site, gently sloping back. The resource protection area as it affects this site, the total lot size of the property is 0.25 acres, of which 96% is located within the RPA. Here is the BMP treatment train. The property, again outlined here in blue, passes through 3 BMPs before discharging. You can see the arrows showing that pathway here. Existing conditions on this property include a wooded lot with wetlands on the rear of the property. The applicant is proposing to construct a single-family dwelling with a deck. Here in red is the 150-foot resource protection areas. The edge of wetlands is shown here in green. The area of the home and deck within the seaward 50-foot RPA is shown in orange, and the area of the driveway, garage, and home within the landward 50-foot RPA is shown in yellow. Additionally, the building setback line is shown here in blue, and the limits of clearing shown around the edge in this sort of wavy line, as well as an infiltration trench on the eastern portion of the property. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 1,289 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 1,794 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 3,083 square feet of impacts. The minimum first floor square footage required for this section of Ford's Colony is 1,700 square feet. The proposed first floor square footage for this home is 1,705 square feet. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 8 planting units, which is 8 canopy trees, 16 understory trees, and 24 shrubs, which the applicant has provided in the mitigation plan you see on the screen right now, showing the areas in green being that proposed mitigation. The applicant has also proposed the infiltration trench on this property. Staff is requesting that an affidavit be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse because of the environmental sensitivity of this lot. Here is the plat from 1999 and the wetlands that were shown at that time compared to the wetlands now delineated and shown on the property. You can see before no wetlands existed on this lot, and now they have encroached on the side here. Here is site photography standing by the road. This stake indicates the the driveway proposed for this property. Moving further into the lot, towards the area the home will be built in. And again, a house corner here looking back. This standing sort of in the middle of the proposed home, looking at a neighboring property. Again, corners of the house as compared to some clearing, flagging, and the wetlands over on this portion of the property. And then looking back up towards the street. And again, just an overview of the front portion of the home. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a single-family dwelling with a deck. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the construction of the single-family dwelling extends into the seaward 50-foot RPA. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The applicant must submit a surety of $6,000 and a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings of 8 canopy trees, 16 understory trees, and 24 shrubs, as well as the installation of the infiltration trench. That a 6-foot chain link fence must be installed at the limits of clearing to reduce impacts to the adjacent wetlands. An affidavit must be recorded in the Williamsburg-James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. This exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by April 12th, 2024, and written request for an extension be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than March 1st, 2024, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll open the public hearing. Mr. Grogg.
Good evening, members of the board. Chase Grogg with Land Tech Resources again. Can you go back to the site plan, Mike? Thank you. So, yes, as staff mentioned, this house is basically the minimum necessary in Ford's Colony for this section. We tried to pull the house, you'll see up in this front left corner. We tried to pull it as far forward and over as possible while still allowing for grading. This is basically a slope. The lot's high point is over here and it slopes straight across. So we tried to pull it as far forward as possible while still leaving an area to get water to come around the front as well as get water to come around the back. All of the water, we're treating about 62% of our impervious on site with this BMP. As staff pointed out, any water not treated here goes into the system within Ford's Colony and goes through a handful of more BMPs before it goes to the actual resource, as well as this side, which due to trying to keep these limits close to the house and proximity to the wetlands, not able to do any infiltration on this backside, but again, goes through a handful of BMPs within Ford's Colony prior to getting to the actual resource. Happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Grogg? I appreciate your attention to the items that you know we'll ask questions about and the addition of the infiltration. I don't know that any of us are particularly thrilled with these infill lots, but I appreciate your attention to the details.
Thank you.
No questions? Thank you. Anybody else care to address this matter before the board? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. The matter is before the board.
So with these lots platted in 1990, I get it, the wetlands change. But in this case, I mean, Mr. Grog's done his due diligence. This one seems to address the majority of our concerns. It is the minimum, and making the effort to meet the board halfway, and so that way the lot still can be responsibly developed. So I have no objections to this proposal.
Any other comments? We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board, case number CBPA Tech 23 Tech 0025 at 100 Red Berkshire.
We have a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request. Is there any discussion from the board? Hearing none, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next item on the agenda is CBPA case 23-0032 at 5 Tay River.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-23-0032 at 5 Tay River. Mr. Chase Grogg of Land Tech Resources, Inc. has requested a deferral of this application for exception to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance while the site plan is finalized for the project. Staff concurs with this request. As this case has been public noticed, staff recommends that the public hearing be opened and stay opened until the May meeting, at which time this case will be heard. Thank you.
We'll open the public hearing and honor the deferral until the next meeting, or do you want to run through the presentation?
I do not wish to run through the presentation, though I do believe this would need a vote to approve the request for a deferral.
Okay. So we have a motion to, do we have a motion? I'll make a motion to approve the deferral for request case number CBPA 23-0032 at 5 Tay River.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0.
getting a little punchy. Next item on the agenda, CBPA case 23-0030 at 153 Shinnecock. Ms. Benedict.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 23-0030. Mr. Chase Grogg of Land Tech Resources has requested a deferral of this application for exception to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance while the site plan is finalized for the project. Staff concurs with this request. As this case has been public noticed, staff recommends that the public hearing be opened and stay open until the May meeting, at which time the case will be heard.
Very good. I will open the public hearing and at the same time make a motion to approve the deferral request for CBPA case 23-0030 at 153 Shinnecock.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Bowie,
Yes.
Mr. Dunn,
Yes.
Mr. Roadley.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
And looking at our agenda, we have under board considerations CBPA 21-0060 at 4373 Landfall Drive.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, Watershed Planner, here to present an extension request for CBPA-21-0060 at 4373 Landfall Drive. Mr. Ricky Edgerton of Edgerton Contracting, Inc. is requesting a 2-year extension to CBPA-21-0060, originally granted on May 12th of 2021. Staff concurs with this request with the stipulation that all permit conditions except for the expiration date be reauthorized and that the new date of expiration be April 13th, 2025. I would like to point out that this is the second extension requested for this exception request. Thank you.
Does this require a vote?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a motion to approve the extension request?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the extension request for CBPA TAC 21-0060 at 4373 Landfall Drive.
Motion to approve, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Ms. Bowie?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Does not look like there's any matters of special privilege. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Before you adjourn, Mr. Chairman, we do have one matter that the staff does request. I know that I'm the last thing before you in the door, so I'll be very brief. Staff has identified a couple issues with the bylaws that haven't been updated since 2017 that staff would like to bring before the board. They are the board's bylaws, so we would like to bring these matters to you. Some of the questions include whether or not board members should have term limits, whether the term should be normalized. This is something, the expiration dates of terms are all wonky. They're all on different dates of the year. Whether or not we should, for better or for worse, enforce the time limits on speakers, given some recent incidences we've had before the board, and impose some new limitations on the numbers of repeat cases. For instance, staff would request putting in the bylaws one exception request per year if it is the same exception request, and then one project could only come up twice per year, even with changes. And then also, we would like to send out a copy of the current bylaws for both the Wetlands and Chesapeake Bay Boards to the members, so that if there are any issues that you can think of that you would like to identify, we could bring before the board for a vote.
Point of clarification, perhaps. You mentioned term limits. Do we currently, I thought we currently had term limits on our appointments that periodically expire.
Yes, you're appointed for a 5-year term, but you could be appointed for unlimited terms. So that was the genesis of it.
You telling me something, Mr. Wilson?
No, sir. No, sir.
But that's the discretion of the staff to extend it. Or is it the Board of Supervisors?
The Board of Supervisors.
Based upon your recommendation?
Yes, in their discretion.
So, but it ultimately comes down to the Board of Supervisors?
Yes.
Does it come down to a vote by the Board of Supervisors for each member, or does each board member control one?
The entire Board of Supervisors votes individually on each one of you all. So all 5 of the Board of Supervisors members vote once for each one of you. It's not like somebody from this district gets one, somebody from that district gets another. So that would be I guess, a self-imposed limit. And these are just ideas. Some of the, I guess, more important or pertinent ones for my point of view would be the number of requests for a project in a given year. Because we've seen numerous repeats, and we don't have anything currently that would prevent somebody from bringing, for instance, the same exact project every other meeting ad infinitum. I'm sure you wouldn't like to see that.
Nope.
Oh, it'd be a nice forcing function to encourage people to cooperate with in the spirit of the act.
So what you're saying is you're going to give us the copy of those 2017 bylaws, read them, come up with additional ideas if we have any on top of what you've just brought up, and then we would vote on that at another meeting?
We could do it at another meeting during board consideration, and then, yeah, or have a special meeting. Either way you want to do it. We're happy to accommodate whatever you'd like to do. My suggestion would be we send it out, you all look at it on your own time. We have a meeting, whether it be a special meeting or a regular meeting. You discuss it, and then we come back with a new set of bylaws that incorporates all of your discussion and all of your wishes. You take a look at it, you up or down approve it.
And you said these are from 2017?
Yes, they were updated in 2017 and 2007 before that.
I think we're in agreement. So we can expect a copy at some point, and then we'll bring this back up before the board for discussion.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other matters before the board? A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.